Hey guys, welcome back to Primer Podcast. My name's Jessica Flake, back here with Pete Stearns.
That's right, kicking off a brand new series, the Easter Conspiracy.
Yeah, so I'll have to ask, where did that come from? Because it has made me it's a different title than you ever experienced with Easter.
Easter and conspiracy theories don't always go, hand in hand. It doesn't fit quite with the, pictures of lilies and daffodils in the tomb. It's actually an interesting story. I was hanging out with a friend a couple months ago, and we were just chatting and talking and wrestling with, faith questions. And he said to me, he was like, "Hey, I've been reading in the book of Matthew recently, and I stumbled across this passage in Matthew that I've never really paid any attention to, and it's kind of causing a little bit of like some road bumps in my faith. Like it feels like this detail, this story that should be talked about, and yet we've never talked about it in the church." And basically asking my question, like, what do you think about it? And if I was honest, when I looked, it's a passage that I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about. It's like one of these ones you just breeze through and you kind of like just dismiss it, right? And yet right there in our central text of the gospel message, there is a report that the vast majority of Jews living in that time believed that Jesus was not resurrected, and instead his body was stolen from the tomb and hid by his disciples. And my friend is like, we got to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And that led me down this rabbit trail of exploring that story and understanding its roots and its origins. So let's start by reading that passage. That's in Matthew 28. I think it's 11 through 15.
Okay. So while the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priest everything that had happened. When the chief priests...
I'll pause you real quick. So chief priests here, every time we see chief priests, we know those are Sadducees. Okay. So when the chief priest, you can keep going in 12.
Okay. So I'm glad you said that because I didn't know that. Okay. When the chief priest had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day.
Right. So there's this really interesting story here. But again, like I said, not one that I had seen. Has that ever been one that you have thought about?
Well, I mean, I feel like it has been a story that has come up in some conversation, but I don't know that I have ever dug deep into study of it. One, I had no idea that the chief priests were Sadducees.
Right.
I just lumped them together with the Pharisees. So, I and then I guess I always, anytime that I saw this, I thought, one, you see the guards that feel like something happened.
Yeah.
But yet they're going back to tell basically their managers, their bosses, and they of what happened, and they said, "Well, we can't have this go."
Right.
Being spread. And so, like I said, I don't know that I've ever really thought about it a whole lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like it's the beginnings of a conspiracy theory, right? It's this story that's being devised between these Roman soldiers and these high priests, these Sadducees, that discredit the resurrection. And it's this version that's now being circulated among a larger group of people. And if we're honest, at that time, it was an easier version of what had happened to accept for the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the people living in that time than the truth of the resurrection. And I think that oftentimes is what happens with a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory effectively embraces the fact that the lie is more digestible than the truth.
Mm-hmm.
That the lie is more comfortable than the truth. That the lie fits my worldview, it fits my narrative more than it fits the truth. And so we have to, though, to really be able to understand where this conspiracy comes from, to really understand that actually, in fact, the resurrection is the true story, you have to kind of explore the characters of this. And we have to understand who these people are. So we're seeing in this, there are these two players right here, and we're going to look at the soldiers on Easter Sunday, but we see they're in cahoots with these chief priests, with these Sadducees. And understanding who the Sadducees are is remarkably important for being able to understand the reality that their version of events is in fact the conspiracy and not the true story. So what do you understand of who the Sadducees are?
Well, like I just said, I like the understanding of Sadducees compared to Pharisees. I'd never had them as two separate groups of
Right.
people. I always lumped them together, and I don't know that I really thought about it a whole lot, to be honest. I just assumed they were both um, grown up, following the Torah, and so like I never realized it was two different sets of people.
Right. Yeah. It's really interesting. You're in good company. Well, I don't know if I'm good company, but I felt the same
In
way.
company.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're in a company. And yeah, honestly, up until really this past fall when we did the Kingdom Confusion series, I had by and large grouped the Pharisees and the Sadducees together,
Mhm.
right? As basically effectively misguided but good people that are trying to follow the Torah, or trying to follow the rules, or trying to do all the right things, but are missing the reality of Jesus as Messiah, right? They're these devout Jews that are practicing their faith, practicing their religion, and Jesus is almost too radical for them to accept, right? They're at this point where it's like, I just can't wrap my mind around it. And so they don't believe he's the Messiah. And if he's not the Messiah, then we need to eradicate him because he's going to lead people astray, right? It's all this well-intentioned but misguided religion, effectively. But as I've sat with it in the last few weeks, in the last few months, and really studied, I've realized there couldn't be anything further from the truth, right? So the Sadducees are effectively, and we talk a lot about this on Sunday, so I won't rehash the timeline and all these things and the origins of the Sadducees. If you're curious, check that out in our sermon this past Sunday. But the Sadducees essentially are this religious mafia that control the temple because they've bought the status as the high priest from Herod the Great. Okay, so they have purchased control effectively of the temple, of the religious systems of the day, of the legal systems in the Jewish culture. And so they are these controlling kind of characters, these seven families, the Zadokim, these seven families that control everything with the temples, with sacrifices, with all these things, specifically in Jerusalem. The Pharisees, on the other hand, are these Torah devout Jews that are trying to practice and live out their faith, and they live all over, but specifically in Galilee, which is why we see a lot of interaction between Jesus and Pharisees, because where's Jesus' ministry? It's in Galilee. Well, Galilee is about 80 miles away from Jerusalem, but something really interesting is going to happen, right? Jesus is going to come down to Jerusalem, and he's going to have a week, a little bit longer than a week in Jerusalem. And in the first day that he is there, the Sadducees recognize him as a remarkable threat. So listen to this. So Jesus is going to the home of Mary and Martha, who have invited him there because their brother Lazarus has died. And so they're inviting Jesus to come and mourn with them. But Jesus does something remarkably unexpected. It says, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. And then the Pharisees So then the chief priests, the Sadducees, and the Pharisees called a meeting, a joint meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing them? They asked. Here is a man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And what will happen? And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. So real quick context here. Basically, this region of Israel is central to the known world at this point. It's a remarkably important region. It's a region that has been conquered by Rome, but Rome doesn't have significant wealth at this time. And so they go through and they conquer these lands and kind of leave them in this in-between space. And so the Sadducees during that time basically broker a deal with the devil, so to speak, where they go to Herod, who is the wealthiest individual the world has ever known, right? So he's in charge of all the spice trade at this time. And the spice trade effectively would be like if one family was in charge of all of the oil in the known world, like just insane wealth. And they go to Herod and they say, Herod, do you want to control this region effectively? And they said, if you do, we're going to have you marry one of our daughters, one of these princesses of the Hasmonean people, one of these daughters of the priests, and then you'll be able to claim kingship over the Jews. And then Herod then goes to Rome and says, do you want my wealth? I've got power. I've got significance in this region. Or I've got significance in this region. I've got wealth. And I'll give you my wealth if you then protect me with power, right? So it creates this relationship, this balance of rule between Herod, who has wealth, Rome, who has power, and Sadducees who have control. And it's this delicate balance now where they're working in this interconnected way that's remarkably corrupt, because the Sadducees want to maintain their control, their significance, and their wealth in the region. And now Jesus is going to come now, and he's going to be just outside of Jerusalem in Bethany, and he's going to perform a miracle that people are starting to talk about. And suddenly these people pass that along to the Sadducees, and the Sadducees are encountering Jesus for the first time in a real way, and they react because they realize if Jesus in fact is the Messiah, if he in fact has just raised somebody from the dead, then all of the people are going to start to listen to him, and they're not going to listen to us. And if we lose control over the Jewish people, then we lose our asset here in this balance of rule. And so we're going to be done away with. Our life is going to be gone. Our power is going to be gone. And so there in that very moment, they hatch this scheme to kill Jesus, this plot to kill Jesus that will ultimately culminate in this conspiracy theory that we see on Easter morning. And what's so powerful about that is the Sadducees, unlike the Pharisees, they deny Jesus. They plot to kill Jesus, not because they don't believe he's the Messiah, but potentially because they do. Right. And they realize if, in fact, he is the Messiah, my whole life is blown up. And so rather than submitting to that, surrendering to a savior, to a Messiah, to a resurrection, they seek to eliminate him completely. And it's just this remarkable story.
It's like that holding on to the world while trying to follow Jesus. You're constantly pulled back and forth.
Right.
Because what we're, it keeping that control. And I'm saying this as a person that knows the downfall that feeling like I'm in control and I need that control can be. And so like that, not reminding ourselves that Jesus is enough. And always going back to, but the world offers this.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part when you look at the Sadducees. It's so easy to dismiss them, right? And be like, wow, they were corrupt, they were messed up, and all these things. They denied a savior whose resurrection, or the resurrection of Lazarus, the savior whose resurrection they actually witnessed and believed. They were the firsthand witnesses of it and still denied it. And you're like, how could they possibly do that? And then you realize, man, every time I deny God's call in my own life to surrender, to release my grip on control and comfort and power and wealth and prosperity and significance, I'm doing the same thing. I'm denying the resurrection. Why? Because if the resurrection is real, if that's the authentic truth, that blows up my life. That means that nothing else in this world matters. and yet it's so easy to hold on to the things that are more comfortable. So yeah, really pretty remarkable story, and one that I'm excited to continue to unpack over the course of these next 5 weeks, Good Friday being included in that. As we look at these different characters, as we look at the groundwork that's laid that allows this conspiracy theory to take root, and we also look at how we're participants in the same conspiracy as well in
Yeah.
these little ways in our lives.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in with our group as well. So hopefully you're able to experience some good conversations in your group and be able to do some individual study as well. And we'll see you soon.
Absolutely. See you soon.